Hello, and welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into a really powerful story today, one that asks a pretty profound question about what happens after a crisis is over. When the storm finally passes and you're left standing in the calm. So, I want you to just imagine this for a second. You spend years running on pure adrenaline, just surviving, day in, day out. Then, one day, the pressure is gone. What happens when your brain finally gets to power down from that? You'd think it would be pure relief, right? But for some people, what comes next is a complete and total collapse. And that's the mystery we're going to unpack right now. Okay, so let's start at the end, which, funnily enough, is where the real story begins. This is about that moment when the long fight was finally over and the real shutdown started. This quote, it says it all, doesn't it? It comes directly from the person we're talking about today. After years of relentless, intense stress, her mind and her body just hit a wall. And the craziest part? It wasn't during the chaos. It was in the quiet that followed. Now, when we say shutdown, we mean a shutdown. This wasn't just feeling a little tired. We are talking about needing someone to physically help her get out of bed. Struggling with the most basic things for her kids, she felt completely out of commission. And the most confusing part for her was that on paper, everything was finally okay. The big stressors were gone, so she was left asking, why do I feel this way now? There's literally nothing wrong anymore. It's such a good question. This is something called a paradoxical collapse. It's that completely baffling experience where your nervous system, after being on high alert for so long, finally feels safe enough to let its guard down. And all the exhaustion it's been holding back just comes flooding out. But, that kind of understanding, that usually comes way later. At the time, she was just looking for answers, and it was incredibly confusing. So, her first step was to seek help, which led to a diagnosis. But as we're about to see, that first answer was, it was only a very small and kind of misleading piece of the puzzle. You really have to see this timeline to get it. This shutdown did not come out of nowhere. It was the result of over 6 years of trauma and high-stakes stress, leaving an abusive partner, suddenly becoming a single parent to 3 kids, and facing just constant financial hardship. It was only when things finally started to stabilize that the collapse happened, and that's when she sought help. So after a really brief 10-minute video call, she got a diagnosis: depression and anxiety. And look, those things were definitely there, for sure. But that diagnosis just didn't explain the core of the problem. That feeling of being completely overwhelmed, the paralysis when trying to start a task, the major issues with focus. It was like treating the symptoms but completely missing the cause. And the medication made that really clear. The antidepressant she was prescribed, it helped. It absolutely helped with her mood. It made it possible for her to get out of bed in the morning. But it didn't touch the task paralysis. She still felt completely stuck, unable to organize her thoughts, or just start the things she knew she needed to do. The why was still a total mystery. To find that why, we have to dig a lot deeper. So this next part is all about connecting the dots between what was happening now in a long history of trauma and chronic stress. So a full neuropsychological report revealed a lifetime really spent in survival mode. It wasn't just one big traumatic event. It was this accumulation: emotional, financial, and physical abuse from a partner, the terror of having to flee to a women's shelter, the immense daily pressure of single parenthood. And all of that was layered on top of a childhood that also included abuse. The report called it a trauma of 1,000 cuts. And this is the turning point in the story. This is where we shift from the subjective feeling of being stuck to the hard, objective data that finally explains why. This data came from a neuropsychological assessment, which is basically a whole series of tests that measure how different parts of your brain are functioning, things like memory, attention, and problem solving. This quote just perfectly captures that feeling of inexplicable paralysis, right? It's not about how hard the tasks are. It could be 20 easy little things, but there's this invisible wall. I just can't. So what on earth could be causing that? Well, the data finally had the answer. And there it was. It wasn't just one thing. The full, comprehensive assessment revealed 3 intertwined diagnoses: inattentive ADHD, a trauma and stressor-related disorder, and major depressive disorder. They were all feeding into each other, creating this perfect storm of symptoms that she was experiencing. But here's where the data got really interesting. It revealed a huge, surprising strength. Her mental stamina score was 130. That's in the exceptional range. It means her brain has this incredibly powerful engine, totally capable of handling long, difficult work. So, if she has all that horsepower, what was the problem? And here it is. This is the whole story in one simple chart. The core paradox. While her stamina is exceptional, her ability of focus is low average. So think about it like this. She has a high-performance engine, but the steering is loose. She can go the distance, but any little bump in the road, a phone call, an email, can send her completely off course, and it's incredibly hard to get back. This is a perfect real-world example she gave from her job. So she's in the middle of a complex task for a client. A second, much simpler request comes in. She quickly takes care of the simple one, sends the email, and then turns back to her original task, only to realize it's been completely wiped from her working memory. The thought is just gone. And the data showed exactly why this was happening. It wasn't a memory problem, and that is so key. Her sustained attention, the ability to stick with one thing, was totally average. She can pay attention when she's not interrupted. But her focus, which is the ability to resist distractions, was low. So the second an interruption broke that attention, getting back on track was a monumental effort. This finally explained that feeling of, I just can't. So, with this newfound clarity, the mystery was finally solved, and for the first time in a very long time, a clear, targeted, and hopeful plan for the future was actually possible. And the plan was comprehensive, as it needed to be. First, managing her medication to actually treat the ADHD, not just a depression. Second, starting trauma-focused therapy to process the past so it would stop hijacking the present. And third, learning practical, everyday strategies to work with her ADHD brain. Things like breaking down big tasks and creating distraction-free zones. When you boil it all down, this story is just such a powerful reminder that when it comes to our mental health, surface-level diagnoses can so easily miss the point. Sometimes taking a deep, evidence-based look under the hood is the only way to untangle what's really going on and find a path that actually leads forward. And we're going to end on that thought, because this story really shows us that what can feel like a personal failing, like laziness or lack of willpower, is so often just a symptom. It's a symptom of a complex dance between our brains, our bodies, and our personal histories. And understanding the why, well, that's always the first step toward real change. Thanks for joining this explainer.